and gay, and now the victim of a heinous crime.
The idea of racial slurs and maybe even some of the homophobic slurs being used toward him, you can see how serious this crime is right now.
Absolutely despicable. And this is America in 2019.
Only as the Chicago Police Department investigated Smollett's story, none of it added up. Now police sources are telling various networks that Smollett himself choreographed the attack, paying a pair of Nigerian brothers to carry it out, even giving them money to buy rope at a local hardware store to make the noose. The trio even rehearsed the encounter in advance. Yet just last week, the Empire actor was afforded a friendly platform on GMA to shop and defend his anti-Trump script.
I could only go off of their words. I mean, who says Empire, this MAGA country?
Why do you think you were targeted?
I can just assume, I mean, I come really, really hard against 45. I come really, really hard against his administration. And I don't hold my tongue.
And the Oscar goes to, well, but eventually those stubborn things called facts got in the way. And suddenly CNN's Brian Stetler and others are now doing the backstroke.
There was a rush to judgment. I think it was mostly in the celebrity press and among activists and among Twitter people. I think it was a really careful reporting by news organizations.
If it turns out that Smullett did indeed orchestrated this attack, paid the attackers, then he's done infinitely more damage to the African-American community, people of color.
Yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about here. So let's start with the fact that we don't have all the facts yet. We should get them. I think one thing we've learned from how this story is unfolded is let's wait and see.
Oh, finally, let's wait and see. Well, some journalists seem to fall into a state of absolute mourning. In the words of the AP's Lindsay Barr, the outrage has now been replaced by surprise, doubt, and bafflement as the singers, actors, and politicians who came out to support the Empire star struggle to digest the strange twists that the case has taken. Some conservative pundits, meanwhile, have gleefully seized on the moment. No, Lindsay, you're wrong. It was the left, the political, media, and Hollywood establishment that seized on the moment because this Smollett tall tale advanced their anti-Trump zealotry. Now we're learning just the inverse is true. Media and political heavyweights were once again willing to slander innocent people, an entire class of people, in a desperate attempt to justify their hatred of Donald Trump. The Democratic 2020 frontrunners tripped over themselves to fan the flames of the Smollett attack. Cory Booker and Kamala Harris called it, quote, a modern-day lynching and urged anti-lynching legislation in response to the attack. Well, on Sunday, Booker suddenly took a more sober, careful approach, saying he wouldn't further address the matter, quote, until all information actually comes out. How convenient. If only he had exercised such caution when the story first broke. Of course, he tried to get off the defensive really fast, though, contending at a town hall that
we know in America that bigoted and biased attacks are on the rise in a serious way. We actually even know in this country that since 9/11, the majority of the terrorist attacks on our soil have been right-wing terrorist attacks.
Oh, the man has absolutely zero shame. Ditto for Kamala Harris.
Which tweet? What tweet?
About saying that it is a modern-day lynching, that...
Sorry.
Yes, Jussie Smollett.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding, and I'm very concerned about, obviously, the initial allegation that he made about what might have happened.
I like how she does this and then laughs. It's really funny. Not. Well, of course, the dim bulbs in the entertainment industry were also eager to advance the MAGA lynching story, taking Smollett at his word, despite circumstances that, let's face it, were really fishy from the outset. Canadian actress Ellen Page made the pilgrimage to Colbert, where she made the mistake of delivering her own lines.
The Vice President of America wishes I didn't have the love with my wife. Connect the dots. This is what happens. If you are in a position of power and you hate people and you want to cause suffering to them, you go through the trouble. You spend your career trying to cause suffering. What do you think is going to happen? And people are going to be beaten on the street.
Well, this is a classic example of wish fulfillment syndrome. When you want something so desperately that you're able to ignore the obvious warning signs. Now think about it this way. The left has staked so much of their own identity and credibility on the plot line that Trump is a really bad man, that they need him to be a really bad man. One who inspires vitriol and violence like the sort that the Empire actor alleged. Now, Smollett himself is rabidly anti-Trump, and speculation is swirling that he orchestrated the faux attack to propel himself to some type of hero status in Hollywood. In other words, kind of think of it the new superhero, Jussie, the MAGA Slayer. Well, the same rush to judgment, though, happened recently with the Covington Catholic high school boys, when allegations became liberal gospel. The white kids in the red hats may as well have been wearing white hoods. Like Kavanaugh accusers Christine Blasey Ford and Julie Swetnick before him, Smollett was allowed to dominate a news cycle because his allegations ultimately reflected badly on President Trump, or so he hoped. But where's the justice when the social justice warriors are actually the ones purveying fraud, hatred, and poison? Nick Sandmann, that Covington Catholic kid, is right to sue everyone who accused him of racism, and I hope he wins big. Brett Kavanaugh had his life turned upside down in the most humiliating way, and we're still waiting for the DOJ prosecution of Swetnick and Avenatti. And meanwhile, Blasey Ford herself collected over $800,000 through a GoFundMe account, supposedly applied to cover her security costs. And as for that Feinstein staffer who likely leaked her original letter, we're still waiting on the Senate Judiciary Committee's findings there. But the fact is, most of the left-wing false accusers operate with impunity because conservatives usually choose to just move on. That's a huge mistake. If these phonies like Smollett aren't made to pay for their defamatory tall tales, we'll just see more of it as 2020 approaches. Even the man who is in the false narrative Hall of Fame seems to kind of agree.
If it is found that Smollett and these gentlemen did in some way perpetrate something that is not true, they ought to face accountability to the maximum. But let's not act like this is some left-wing hoax that some are saying on social media.
Oh, no, it's not a left-wing hoax at all, Al. Okay. Well, what is it then? Well, speaking of frauds, maybe Andrew McCabe can argue that the president himself hired Smollett and the Nigerians at the behest of the Russians to carry out the whole thing. Hey, they might as well try to bring all these fraudulent storylines together. Think about how much fun that'll be. And that's the angle. Joining me now is someone who's done some of the best and some of the most honest reporting on this case from day one, is Rafer Weigel. And he's a reporter with our Fox affiliate in Chicago, and he joins us now. Rafer, when did this story, to you, start looking really suspicious?
Well, as soon as we heard about it, I first off want to apologize for my casual dress here. I'm actually on a mini vacation with my son here in Las Vegas, so I dressed for Cirque du Soleil. I didn't dress for your show, Laura.
No problem. You're excused.
Okay, thank you. As soon as police let us know about it, I immediately called my sources at Chicago PD. My colleagues and I in the media locally, we were skeptical from the very beginning, and so were police, but that's our job to be skeptical. You know, it's the old adage, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. So when we started reporting the story in Chicago, we did not report that Jussie Smollett was attacked. We reported that Jussie Smollett says he was attacked. I've grown up in Chicago. I've lived there most of my life, and, you know, this was a pretty outlandish claim that he made, given the geography in Streeterville, which is a very heavily populated area, a lot of people walking around, you know, something as extreme as this, wearing red hats, carrying bleach, putting a noose around someone's neck. It seemed very unlikely that in that area nobody would have stepped in. Nobody would have videotaped it with their cell phone.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So
Rafer,
go ahead.
hold on.
Sorry.
I have so many questions. Did anyone from the national media call you and say, look, Rafer, you know the area, you're a longtime resident, Chicago, what are you hearing? Because I was seeing a lot of people, it was almost gleefully jumping on the story because it fulfilled a narrative that a lot of people on the left or who lean left want to believe. That Donald Trump hates all these people.
I'm generally a defender of my profession when we get attacked, but at the end of the day, we did mostly drop the ball. I mean, we did not at Fox 32, but my media cohorts definitely did when they immediately reported that he was attacked without getting all of the facts. And when I tweeted out the skepticism that I was getting from within the Chicago Police Department, I was attacked, and I didn't take it personally because I did know that they were, you know, these were people who wanted a specific narrative. But I felt confident in my sources that you know, everything that I was learning was accurate. They told me, you know, you can bet on this. Yes, he was carrying the Subway sandwich on video when he walked back into his condo. You know, yes, we didn't find this on video anywhere. So, you know, I just stuck to the facts.
Yeah. It didn't have, you were attacked. And I think everyone watching, first of all, thank you for coming on when you're supposed to be with your family. Really appreciate it because everyone wanted you on their show tonight. So thank you for coming on. This is what Black Lives Matter spokesman said, DeRay McKesson, okay? He said, I realized today that Chicago reporter Rafer Weigel is responsible for much of the misinformation disseminated by Chicago PD sources about Jussie Smollett, as he literally just repeats whatever the police say. And there were other similar things. Chad Griffin also said something very similar about leaks that were given to local reporters. And basically, this is why victims of hate crimes, what they fear and why they often stay silent. So the microscope was then trained on you and your local reporter colleagues at other networks who are just got, like, guys, who walks into their apartment with the noose around their neck or waits to take the noose off? You know, none of that made sense to kind of just regular workaday reporters, and yet you're attacked.
Well, I didn't take it personally. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, real journalism shouldn't be partisan, but I understand this is a story that became heavily politicized from both the left and the right. Everybody wanted their own narrative, and all we wanted to do at my shop was to just stick to the facts. We do have an intimate relationship with Chicago PD. We have sources in there. They've told us things about this investigation that we are not reporting because we don't want to compromise the investigation. It's a delicate balance. You know, we want to hold them accountable, but at the same time, we also, you know, we have to deliver what we know, and sometimes we are getting things from sources that maybe they don't want us to report. For instance, the fact that the brothers admitted that they were paid, that they did rehearse this, and that it was staged. You know, from what I understand, Jussie Smollett was on his way in to talk to police, and once it got out that these brothers had essentially rolled over on him, he changed his mind. And I talked to his crisis manager, Ann Kavanaugh, this morning, and she said that right now they don't have any plans to bring him in. So, I mean, in terms of the reports of the grand jury, TMZ came out with that. Police tell me that's premature. That would only be a last resort if Smollett does not come in voluntarily. And right now they're hoping he still will.
He ain't coming in.
It's weird because his attorney said that they're cooperating, but right now it doesn't appear that they are.
Right. Rafer, thank you so much for joining us and for your reporting on this in a sober, pragmatic, and unbiased manner. We really, really appreciate it. By the way, we also learned today that, as Rafer just reported, so Smollett is refusing to meet with police. That, according to this statement from his, as you've heard, crisis management consultant. Yes, he has hired a crisis management consultant. Now, Ann Kavanaugh, who Rafer is also talking to, saying Smollett's attorneys will keep an active dialogue going with Chicago police on his behalf. We have no further comment today. So at what point does the Chicago Police Department compel Smollett to speak to them? And look what they did to Roger Stone. They showed up with like 17 vehicles and guns drawn. I'm not saying they should do that, by the way, but I'm just talking about the overreaction with Stone. To provide some insight, we're joined by former LAPD detective, Fox News contributor Mark Furman. All right, Mark, I've been dying to talk to you about this case. Number one, from the beginning, we had said here on this show, these are really serious allegations. They sound really bizarre, but every fact should be followed, every lead. I mean, so that's just what we said, and it started to get odder and odder as time went on. But he won't speak to police now, and I don't think he's going to speak unless he's compelled to. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. I don't think he's going to, because he has nothing to say except for the truth. They're certainly not going to listen to his lies. They've got everything prepared to actually destroy every kind of alibi, lie, or fantasy that he's going to create. So when you look at this right from the beginning, the red flags are huge. First, this is not Trump country in Chicago. And the second thing, it wasn't much of a beating. All I saw for injuries was a little scratch on his right cheek. The suspects let him keep the phone in which he was talking to his manager at the time of the attack, and the manager heard the yelling and the screaming. So when you look at all this, and then no property was taken, there wasn't much of a beating, it's one of those raised eyebrow things that the first officers feel when they get there, and they tell the detectives, and they go, okay, let's go through the motions, but this smells. And
Right,
this smelled from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning. I mean, again, you want to believe people, and they make such an incredibly, serious and disturbing allegation. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to believe people do this, but it happens. It happened with Kavanaugh. It happened with the Covington Catholic kids. It's happened in other cases, and it looks like it could very well have happened here. Now, Mark, so you raised all the red flags from the beginning. I think a lot of people were afraid to talk about those because then you're being, critical of someone who's a liberal, African-American, gay, and then all those hateful pejoratives come directed at you. So people were kind of afraid to say that. But now we find out that the police went into the apartment, or the place where the Nigerian gentlemen were living, and they seized a number of things from that apartment, and they're cooperating fully with the police. Can you go through why those items are so important to this investigation, the magazine and bleach and so forth?
Well, everything that was involved in Smollett's description of the attack on him, that's what they're looking for in the search warrant. So they have been unavailable. They've been in Nigeria. So during this whole time, I think the whole investigation for Smullett really came apart February 11th when he failed and refused to give them unredacted phone records. That was the first problem. Then they knew that their suspicions were probably true. When they got off the plane and they arrested him, and they issued this search warrant, and they went in, when they got these items, now they know that these two men have been connected to get into the apartment, and now they found evidence that further connects them. Now they had to explain it all. When they got to the station, I'm sure they were separated. I'm sure that they were confronted with the evidence, and I'm sure they rolled over in a heartbeat. And they rolled over simultaneously in two different rooms with the exact same story. They corroborated. I wouldn't doubt they gave them polygraphs. Yeah. They probably gave them a money path, how the money was paid. So.
Yeah. And the magazine, the letter that arrived in January 22nd, they seized the magazine, and maybe those letters were found cut out of that magazine. So this whole thing is, well, the developing facts, we're going to follow them where they take us. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. And it's not just Smollett and the Covington High School boys fiasco. There are other hate crimes hoaxes that we want to share with you tonight. Dinesh D'Souza will tell us what they reveal about our current culture and a lot more. Stay there.